Welcome everybody to another Eye of the Serpent Tarot Pick a Card reading. Today's reading we're exploring why this relationship, this connection you have at the moment, and I'm going to presume in most cases it's a love relationship, is so intense. So it may be a relationship that you're in at the moment, or it might be one that's just on the horizon, someone you've just met and they've really struck you and you feel a really strong connection, but you're not yet sure what it actually is. This might pick up other types of relationships. If it does with the cards, I will mention them. But I do think in most cases when we're talking about really intense connections, it tends to be in that vicinity of love relationships, romantic relationships, or potentially the sort of soulmate, twin flame, whatever terminology you would like to use for this, around very intense connections that might be there for our life path and our spiritual path. So as with all tarot readings, this is for the collective, and so take what resonates with you and leave the rest, because some of the messages in the pile that you pick, even if it primarily resonates for you, some of it may be for someone else. So make sure to use your own discernment. And if you want to choose more than one pile because you've either got more than one person you're wondering about, or because you feel that possibly there's an amalgamation of messages, by all means go and look at more than one reading. But in general terms, the piles as usual, pile 1, pile 2, pile 3, are further differentiated by the fact that pile 1 has a rhodonite heart crystal on it, pile 2 has an amethyst heart crystal on it, and pile 3 has a rose quartz crystal heart on it. So once you know what you want, the timestamps are in the description box below, and if you feel the need, you can always pause the video and contemplate the various options before you choose. But when you know what you're most drawn to, I'll see you in your reading. Welcome pile 1 to your reading. The first two cards here were the cards that were underneath the crystal that you chose to come to this particular reading, and they represent Greek or Roman archetypes or mythologies that I hope to help uncover some of the dynamics that are operating in why this is such an intense connection. And so the first card is representing the other person, your significant other if you are in a relationship, or the person that you're interested in. And then the second card represents you. And this is to show the sort of, as I say, underlying emotions, underlying desires, underlying directions as much as anything else, that you are going towards this person and they're coming towards you, potentially unconsciously. You may resonate to this, or it might be something that's a bit surprising but you can reflect upon. So the other person here is coming up as Hebe, who is a daughter of Zeus and Hera. And this particular card and this representation of Hebe is about having fun, enjoying life. There's an almost childlike innocence to it, and that does not mean that the person that you're interested in is childish or necessarily younger than you, though in some cases that may be the case. It's more the aspect of their internal self and maybe what they're looking for. I suspect with many of my pile 1 that the person that you're drawn to, or the person that you've gone into a relationship with, has possibly had a difficult time more recently. Maybe they've been working incredibly hard on something, almost to the level of being a workaholic, or possibly they came out of a difficult relationship. It could be both, it could be anything, but there's something that has triggered them to want to be more playful, more fun. Now, what you may experience in those circumstances is someone who wants to do things that are lighthearted, that doesn't want to necessarily commit or take something to the next level depending upon whatever point you're at in the relationship. It doesn't necessarily mean that they won't. It just means at this point they really want to enjoy themselves, and they're drawn to you because they think you're fun. They think that you are providing them that sense of lightness, and I think also security. I do think that they have, as I say, come out of something that was difficult, something that was stressful in some way. And it's interesting because if they're responding to that, you're coming up as Hestia, and Hestia is the goddess of hearth and home. So you represent to them someone who has that stability, and possibly if they had an idyllic childhood, or if they saw fun and energy from being around those who they feel at home with, that could be part of why they're drawn to you. The issue potentially with this, and I think with most really intense connections, there's usually some adjustment that needs to be made between the two parties. It's part of the energy of intense relationships. It's like the irritant in the oyster that creates the pearl. The tension here potentially is that they are in a phase of their life where they want to enjoy themselves and just enjoy the moment. And you are in a phase of your life, or you are, as your personality, someone who really likes to know there is a longer term future, there is a sense of stability, and there is a sense of mutual nurturing. It doesn't mean to say that you won't get that from the other person. In fact, I think the fact that they're drawn to someone who has that energy around them suggests in the longer term that's where they're going. But there could be a timing factor, or it could be part of what's confusing you, because you might get one sense that they know that you are potentially traditional. You may very much want to follow the mores of your family and your culture. But on another hand, it does look like it's a little bit hard to pin them down at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the tarot for each. So the first row we're going to look at is how your other person is feeling towards you, is looking at the relationship, is looking at the connection, and also anything that Spirit may feel is important to say to give us a little bit more understanding about why they're in that space at this point in time. Is this something that is absolute to their personality, or is it something that has arisen from a more recent time or a more recent activity? Okay, so I do think that there is an issue potentially for them that they are coming out of. And I do think for many of them, when I said before maybe workaholism, there is a sense potentially of that. They do look like someone who in their actual base personality is very loyal, is very committed, does want things that are material and for the long term, and has very much put that into their work. And I do think that many of them have been very focused on work, career, almost to the point of nervous exhaustion by the looks of things, because the Knight of Coins is that sense of dedication to work or to service in some way, whether it's a job or whether it's that they're just incredibly helpful normally to other people and supportive of other people. But whatever it is, it's been at some cost mentally. There is mental exhaustion around them. The good news is that's the end of it, and that fits with this energy pile one, because they wouldn't be in this more playful, I want to have fun energy if they were still sitting in the Ten of Swords. But it does give us a clue as to why they're very focused on the now and the moment. Some of them may well, in their spiritual side, focus very much on the power of now, that sort of concept, because maybe they've been spending a lot of their time looking at the future, particularly, as I say, around career or around service to others. And they're realizing that there is also the power of being in the moment and the power of being connected in the moment. They also do look as though they've either found it hard to make decisions about relationships, or they had a relationship that didn't work out in the not too distant past. Because the Two of Cups reversed and the Two of Wands reversed suggest to me that they started, or they might have been interested in something recently that didn't really land, that didn't come into being, and it may well be because they couldn't give it the time it needed. So they're making a conscious decision now that they want to give something the time to enjoy and to see what it can develop into. It's very possible for some of my pile one that the person that you're interested in may have been in a relationship that had shown a lot of promise but really fell apart because of both parties potentially being really workaholic and really focused. There may have been something for some where they were drawn to someone else who was about career, about that side of work, that not necessarily that side of work, sorry, that side of life. And so that didn't work out because they were both too focused in this space. So I do think that for many of my pile one, they're drawn partly to you because you represent something different. This doesn't mean that you couldn't have potentially met through work, but they see you as someone who has a different set of priorities and ones that they could potentially move towards what they really want and move into a different phase in their lives. I do think that for some of my pile one, I think that you may be sort of in the sort of more mature years of your life, and so may your significant other here. There is almost like two categories here. There's one category which is younger people who are in their 20s or 30s, and the focus here has been for your other person establishing themselves and maybe having brief relationships. But I do get a sense also that for some, it's been after quite a long period of time, and it's looking at a different focus of life, that it's not so much about career, it's not so much about self-actualization in that space, but the way this other person is looking at finding the right connection is to look anywhere but at sort of mutual careers or mutual ambitions, to look at something which is more, as I said, in the moment. So I think that's good because there was a potential tension here between the light-hearted and the not committed and the very committed and the very stable. But the sense that that's there is that I think that once they feel comfortable, they can sublimate that similar sense of commitment and loyalty into a relationship. It's just not been where they've put that energy before. So whether, as I say, we're talking about people more in their 40s and 50s, and this is sort of after real establishment of career, or whether people who've come to this reading are younger and it was more about that first level, but understanding that's been reached, I do think the other person is connecting with you on that. And I think one of the reasons that it's an intense connection is you represent to them the longer term aim that they want, but the different avenue of getting to it, not through working together necessarily or making that the centre of it if you are actually in the same organisation, for instance. It's let's get out and have fun, let's do something different, or you're absolutely in a very different career, a very different path, and that's one of the things that they like about it. So let's have a look at what you're experiencing at the moment, because you could be feeling a little bit like, well, is this going to land? Is this going to either become something if it's just someone you're interested in, or is it going to go to the next level if it's someone that you've been with for a while, or is it always just going to be about having fun? So there's a decision point that you would need, I think, around this intense connection. But of course you're drawn to them. You wouldn't be in this reading if you weren't. So let's see how it's impacting on you at the moment. So pile one, I think you've already come to some conclusions about this. I think that many of my pile one have come to this reading almost for confirmation, because it looks to me like you've gone through a period of time of being really rather worried about where this was going and whether it was the right connection and whether you were both on the same page. And there's probably been some instances where you felt disappointed, whether it was that you were, if it's very new, you were hoping the person would ask you out, for instance, or would join in activities with you, or whether it's that you've been together for a while and you haven't really been able to get to the heart of this person because they've been so focused on all of this, and then also on, I don't want to make decisions now, I don't want to do that yet, I just want to have a good time. It looks like that did cause you some concern, and that's understandable. If you feel a very strong connection to somebody, and I think the reason that you do and the reason that they're drawn to you is that ultimately you're more similar than different, but they're just in a different headspace at the moment. But if you feel that connection, then I think it can be worrying if that there seems to be a dissonance between what you really think is there in terms of the intensity of it and then how they want to represent it. It's possible that they like to play mind games, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I don't get a sense of this being negative, but I think it's all about fun And so it just may feel too light. And I think it has been hurtful for you. It's been something that has made you worried. But the good thing is that you're coming out of that. It's like you've had an aha moment. And it may be for some of my pile one that the timing of this has coincided with that aha moment. It may be that for many of my people who've come to this reading, your other person has been really focused on something, and it's only now that they're coming out of it and enjoying it and being able to even think about something, and you've kind of understood it, I guess. You've kind of seen it and said, okay, I can see why they might be like this. It might also be for some of my pile one, if you've been in a relationship for quite a while with that person and they've been more like you and very focused on things that were long term, though you look more focused on relationship and they look more focused on career, but maybe that seemed like a good balance. That the very fact that they've come out of this and want to do things that are fun might have been a little bit surprising, and that might have caused some of that. It might have caused some anxiety, but you're coming out of it. You're realizing that with the Eight of Coins here, that there is a lot of depth to this. There is a lot of investment that will return. So in a sense, by keeping the home fires burning, literally, that sense of Hestia, you can see that this person is just on a little bit of a different journey briefly to defrag really from what they've been dealing with, and that then they are much more likely to come back to this sort of earthy energy, and then there is enjoyment. So I think the intensity of this connection is you can see it. You can see probably a little bit more clearly than they can, pile one, that there is a real long-term similarity, that there is a harmony between the two of you. But because at the moment for them, to live into that is to live into this difficult thing, they're probably just being a little bit contrary about it all. And they're really wanting to say, live in the moment, as I say, and you want to look at the future. But I do think you can see, and I think you've realised, and this is really just more of a confirmation, that there is that longer term connection, there is that longer term happiness that can come. But you've just got to give it the time and maybe have a good time. There's nothing wrong with having fun with someone if you realise where it's coming from and it's not a sign of a lack of interest or a lack of longer term commitment. It's just a sign of them needing to de-stress a bit and just enjoy life. Then that's one of the pleasures of a great relationship, is to enjoy life. So don't take that light-hearted thing as being light-hearted about the relationship. It's not even really who they are, but it's who they need to be at the moment. So that's a pretty clear message. What I want to do is I want to use a particular oracle that is a very classic fortune-telling oracle. Tarot and oracles like this are more around sort of psychological and emotional states of being. So they give a sense of the dynamics under something. But there are various oracles that you can get, and this one that I'm about to use is one, which is much more like a classic fortune telling. Now, it doesn't mean anything's fixed. It doesn't mean this is absolutely the case if something comes up that looks challenging. But it gives you some ideas about some of the dynamics, both potentially blessings and also any challenges that you need to bear in mind with this understanding that you have about the dynamic. So this is an interesting set of cards. It says, time is of the essence, forces beyond your control intervene, and your secrets are safe. I do wonder whether some of my people who've come to this are working with the person that they're interested in, or they're in a relationship. It's possible that in some cases it may even be a relationship that you're not bringing to the surface around your career. So this is a specific reading of this. I'll go back to some more general ones. If that's the case, and that's part of the anxiety around it for both of you, and particularly if this person has been very focused on career, it looks very strongly as though you don't have to worry too much about other people being aware of it until you're ready to either work separately so that you can be together without that sort of issue, or if you're in an organisation that really doesn't have a problem with that, but you don't want it to be seen until you're really more sure of this, that your secrets will be kept safe. Beyond that, I wonder whether some of you might be a little bit concerned if this person, as I say, does this sort of mind game thing. And again, I don't feel like it's negative mind games, but if you feel like you've opened your heart to this person and you're not really getting a sense of, are they there with me? You know, have I given too much at this point? Again, I think that is saying, don't worry. Your secrets are safe with this person. They are not frivolous. They are not a fly-by-night person. Even if it looks like maybe previously they've only had brief relationships, I think that has more to do with how they focused. And now they're just needing that time to have fun before they can commit, because that's kind of why they're drawn to you, pile one. They see that longer term thing, but they're not necessarily saying it yet. So if some of you feel like, wow, have I shown my own hand too much? I don't think so. I think you're fine. But it does look like something's going to happen that has an impact on this. So if you are working together, it might be some change in the working environment, some offer that one or other of you have, which then means that something external is going to push this through to a point where you need to come to that level of recognition and make that decision. And it's coming quicker than possibly your other person would have desired or that you think will happen. But I don't think it's necessarily bad. There's not a bad feeling about it. There's nothing really bad in this connection at all that I can see. But it may make this person feel a little bit rushed by external factors. And if there's someone who has been if there's someone who has had anxiety because of things in the work life or the material world, and then something like this comes along, then that could make them step back. So don't be too concerned if that occurs, because I think they'll come back forward again, and it really just is a matter of waiting and giving them the space that they need. But there probably is a time at which you may have to say there's a decision. There is going to be a timing on this. It feels like an opportunity comes to one or other of you to work interstate, for instance, or, as I say, something happens in a work environment if you are working together, or you have certain family commitments that you have to attend to, and that is causing some pressure on the time that you can spend there, and a decision needs to be made about whether they become more part of your family or not. There's something external, and I don't think it's far away, and when it comes, you'll know and you'll need to make a decision, or they'll need to make a decision. So that's interesting. Let's have a look at some of the astrology energy around this. So I'm going to put down some cards for the astrology energy around your person and also around you, just to get a little bit more information about what the general energies are around this dynamic at the moment. So the first thing that we have around your significant other as Capricorn, I don't, it's the one thing about these cards, I don't necessarily agree always with the key words that are with them. So with Capricorn, I don't think Capricorn are users. I think when you see that might be how that comes across. But I think what it's trying to say is a very material focus, a very career focus. So I suspect that's still there, even if they've come out of a really heavy period of time and they want to have fun. I think that they will have peaks and troughs in their working life, and so there is a bit of a pattern around this, and you may need to be able to ride with that pattern. But having said that, Capricorn, when they make a decision and when they commit, they really commit. They also have the first house, and this is saying the body, so there could be literally, as I said at the beginning, for some of them nervous exhaustion. They could literally need to de-stress for their physical well-being, and you may even see it. They may be having trouble sleeping, they may have been burning the candle at both ends, and it might be clear that that's the case. So on that level, that playful thing is really important, as long as they don't overexert themselves in that side of things either. The other thing with the first house is that they are quite focused on who they are in the world and how they are seen in the world. And that's not necessarily like egotistical or anything along those lines, but it is something, it's important to them to be seen the way that they want to be seen. And for the most part for them, that's around their career. A large chunk of who they think they are in the world is around their career. But in their emotional life, they don't want to be carrying all that in. But they do want to be respected, and they will want that from you. They will want to see that you respect what they do in the material world, and that ultimately, if they move towards you around this more committed thing, that they are actually a good catch. Like there is that element that's important to them, to show that they're committed in their work, they're committed in their trajectory, they're committed to relationships, because at the end of the day, they're very spiritual, very spiritual. They maybe don't come across that way to you if you've only just met them and you are having, nice, good time with them, but you're feeling there's something more here and I can't really pin them down. They have a huge sense of faith, a huge sense of spiritual belief in whatever way it is, whatever tradition they follow. And they have a real sense of wanting to find a spiritual connection. And they think they found it with you, and you think you found it with them. And there is a degree to which that is absolutely right, Pile 1. Because you have Yod, which is the finger of fate. It is the aspect within a chart, or within a transiting planets within a chart, that effectively, as you can see, seem to be pointing towards something. So it's pointing towards this situation. There is, for all that I feel like many of my Pile 1 have come across this person either potentially through family or through work connections, networks and so forth, or literally at work, and it might feel like it was just serendipitous. You were meant to meet this person. So the intensity is partly about this, and you recognise that, and so do they. And you're ultimately exactly what they need in the longer term. Of course, they have to make the decisions to do that, and they have to come out of the Hebe eventually and meet you in Hestia, so to speak. But I think that there's a very good chance of that. You also have a real sense of the romance around this. So the 5th house is about creativity, but it's also about romance, and I feel like that's what's showing up here. You have a romantic view to destiny, you have a romantic view to relationships in general, and you feel this with this person. They fit that cutout at their depth level. I think you've really got a strong psychic connection. I think you know who they are underneath this mask almost that they have at the moment. And as I say, maybe you've known them for quite a long period of time and it's just moving in this direction, and because of that you literally know that they're more like you than they're appearing at the moment. But if this is someone new to you, then you're right about that. That connection is there. You think about it a lot. It's interesting. You maybe overanalyze it a bit, but having said that, I think that capacity to think about this and to look at it almost objectively is why you were in underneath here. You've come out of the anxiety and you've come out of the disappointment because you've understood it. You are someone who does need to understand things. You feel much more in control of destiny and all those things if you understand them. So I think even just getting that sense of this is what's going on here will help you. And I think, as I say, most of you have already really worked that out. You were coming here for confirmation. The other good thing about this too is that Gemini is able to, people say two-faced, but that's not what I'm talking about here. It's being a number of people that suit the circumstances and being able to communicate in a number of different ways, being able to wear a number of masks as well. And that's partly what's going on here. I don't think it's meant in any duplicitous way. I just think it's something they need to do at the moment. So you can meet them at that level. And if there's mind games or banter, you're absolutely their equal, and they really enjoy that, Pile 1. So I think the connection is that you are really much more similar than you possibly think at the moment, or that the apparent circumstances and activities that you're doing together, or options to do activities together, seem more like than you maybe would have been looking for. But give it time. I do think this is another confirmation, something is going to come along to trigger that decision sooner rather than later. And I do think with most of my Pile 1, it will be towards having the relationship. So there's a couple of other oracles I want to use just to sort of close this out. The first is an oracle called the Unspoken Oracle, and it's what generally speaking, it's what the other person would say to you if they were either brave enough or you had them on a lie detector test or something like that, because it's just to uncover something that may be unspoken, as the name of the oracle is. It sometimes also has timing, so if we get timing, that will be interesting, given some of this sense of something coming along to make this be whatever it's going to be. All right, so this is suggesting to me some of what was showing up for you around emotional disappointments and around some anxiety which you're coming out of. I think for many of my pile one, there probably was something they did or said. They were too lighthearted, the banter went a bit too far, they wouldn't commit and were seeing a number of other people when they first met you, and all of those sorts of things. It could be any of those sorts of things. There was something where they recognised that they hurt you. So my biggest regret was hurting. I want this too. Will you forgive me? So part of that decision that is coming up might be about that, about being with them in the moment, if you want to forgive them. But I think for most of my pile one, you do. You've come to the realisation about where that came from. Some of it might also have nothing to do with seeing anybody else or anything like that. It may just be that they were AWOL, missing in action because of the work, and they feel like they hurt you and they need you to forgive them so that you understand that they want this too. But I still think there's something that's coming. There's something that is destined to come to really bring this to the surface. So the last thing I want to do is I've got basically some letters that come. So it's just sort of done like charms with letters. So I'm just going to pull a few, and they may refer to the initials of the person we're talking about. They could be other people that are involved. They could be anything. So it's really just for you to use your own intuition beyond whatever I might surmise out of this as to whether or not these letters give you some other information. So we've got S, U. U is obviously important in some. U is very important sometimes. Maybe that is just you. There's a connection to you that might be literally as in you if it was done in sort of abbreviated letters. And we've got S again, G, J, and J. So it really wants you to know J. It really wants you to know U. Really wants you to know S. And B, X, and K. So one of the things that I think with these particular things, when X comes up, it sometimes it could be someone's name. It could be a Xavier, for instance, something like that. But I do feel quite often X is saying, wait, something's coming. And I feel that very much connects with this. Don't make a decision until you have more information. I think that's what X tends to mean. As to the others, they could be initials that are relevant to this. Possibly the other person has, a S or a G or a J or a B or a K, or someone else who is going to be important in whatever is pushing this along could be there. So for instance, if you are in a workplace together, there could be a manager or somebody who could make an offer that has those sorts of initials. There could be people in your family that connect to this. I do think the U is really just a confirmation that there is a real focus on you, even if it doesn't feel like that. So I think it's more phonetic than literal there. But if you are looking at this and you think, I know what U is and it's something else, and that's fine. So those letters are just there as a further piece of information for who they resonate with, as to whether or not got the right sort of people and you understand what's going on. Some of those letters could be, if it's around a workplace, letters that have to do with the workplace. They could be locations if you were going to move. So as I say, there's many different things, but I feel like that this is pointing that person's attention to you. If you've doubted it, I think it's definitely there. I think this is saying, wait, there's something coming, which fits with the rest. As to the other letters, as I say, it could be initials that are relevant. If it doesn't resonate with you, just let it go. These letters are very much for those that might go, aha, that's a further confirmation. And I do think with pile one that you have largely come for a confirmation. I think that you know there is more to this relationship than possibly the other person is showing right now. And you know that there will be a point at which that comes to the surface. What I think you didn't know, and what I think will be interesting to see in the not too distant future, is what this hand of fate, and it's sort of almost being shown there again with that sense of faith that they have, what that will bring into the mix to help bring this to a decision point, because I think that's what it needs to be so that you can truly understand what the relationship can be. So pile one, I hope that that resonated. I hope that that makes sense for the situation that you're in, and if so, please like the video and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And if you have any comments on it as to what resonated for you, what these letters might mean if they connected with you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next pick a card reading. Welcome pile two to your reading. These first two cards are the cards that were under the crystal that you chose to come to this reading, and they represent the person, the other person that you are coming to the reading about, and you. And it's an oracle, a mythic oracle based on Greek and Roman mythology. And I'm using it because I think that mythological archetypes are very good at uncovering the underlying dynamics going on in a person's life and also in the emotional connections in their life. So by understanding what these two archetypes are, we can get a sense about what's drawing the two of you together and how that might also interact with what's going on in both your lives apart from the relationship and how these things impact. This is a fascinating set of cards for this, I have to say, pile two, because they're very powerful archetypes we have here. The archetype for the other person is Hecate, so she, or Hecate, depending on how you want to pronounce it. She is the goddess of the crossroads. She's an absolutely ancient goddess, predates Greek and Roman mythology. She's about transformation, she's about decisions, she's about all the aspects of life. She's often seen as the maiden and the woman and the crone, or maiden and mother and crone. Doesn't mean that your other person is female. This is a transformative, fate-like energy around this person. And I think that many of them will carry with them that sense of being a light bearer and an information source when somebody is trying to make a decision or where they're at the crossroads. This person at this point could literally be at the crossroads in some way in their life as well. There could be a major decision that they're trying to make. Hecate could be potentially there with them in spirit around helping to make that decision. So there's some really major transformational energy going on with them. The thing that I think is interesting here is that I think it does work on both levels in this attraction, because you're coming across as Chiron, and Chiron is also a very powerful figure. It's the wounded healer. It is the character who is extremely good at healing other people but often cannot heal themselves. So there's a couple of layers to this, I think, pile two. I think firstly, you're drawn to this person because their transformative energy and their light at the crossroads can maybe help you heal something quite deep within yourself. It could be past relationships that were painful. It could have been a childhood that was painful. There's something where you learnt an enormous amount of empathy. You're a highly empathic person, and that in itself, it's almost like it's an open wound in and of itself. So I think part of why you're drawn to this other person is because you sense that ancient wisdom and you sense that capacity for them to help you transform, to heal. So some of you may not be here about a romantic relationship, or if you are, it might be one that is profoundly healing. But some of you may be here with an intense connection with somebody who ultimately helps you transform rather than stays with you in the longer term, and it may not be romantic. I do think most people who've come to this reading will be talking about romance, and so it is a profoundly transformative and healing, or this is the potential of it, relationship. And that's, you sense that, you know that. But for some, you may indeed have come here because it's about a different sort of thing, a friendship or someone within your family, some connection that is taking on a higher level of intensity. And it's because of that sort of dynamic, if that's the case. For them, your capacity to heal others If they're going through a transformation, then they will be very much drawn to you about how to navigate that in a way that is productive and beneficial. So there's an enormous interplay of complementary energies and complementary approaches here. So it's no wonder it's intense. I think it has a purpose, and I think one of the key things will be what its longer term purpose is, whether it's a relationship that is intense for a period of time to take you both through that process, or whether through that process it becomes something more. So let's have a look at what cards come up. I'm going to firstly look at cards for where the other person is, what's going on in their life, how they're viewing the connection with you, anything that Spirit feels we should know, and then we'll use some cards to have a look at what you're experiencing and feeling with this connection. So firstly, the other person. This very much picks up what I'm saying about the dynamic, pile 2, of what I think they see you can bring. It's interesting that the first card that's come up is the Six of Swords, which is a card of peace of mind. And it's normally peace of mind that comes after a battle. And they've certainly been through some form of a battle, whether it was an internal one about their soul and spiritual, or whether it was something very much in the material world. And I think for many it might have been. There's been something where something has not been fair, something has not been right by them. Some of them may literally have come out of a relationship recently, like a divorce. There could have been something like that that's occurred that's been very transformative and difficult. If that's the case, it wasn't a pleasant divorce, I have to say. There was a lot of emotional hyperbole around it, and there were issues around resources or even potentially access with children, anything material. They've suffered some kind of loss, pile 2. Whether you know them well enough yet to know that or not, I'm not sure, but if you do, then you'll know that that's the case. But it's true. And they had their sense of justice and balance and karma and all those things severely rocked. They really went through a dark night of the soul, and they felt out of balance and out of control of all of that. And I think that might have been unusual for them. If they're coming up as Hecate, then there's someone who normally deals with the slings and arrows of life really well and understands change and growth, but there's something that hasn't been good. They do look for some form of healing, and they do see you as someone who can help provide that to them. And it's interesting too, the Six of Swords always has this sense of a journey, and the people have come out of the issue and they are journeying together. And that also, in its own way, this is across water, this has crossroads, but in both cases you get that sense of them about to embark on a journey, having come out of this dark period. But they definitely see you as someone to travel with, somebody that would help them on that journey. Whether or not, and we'll see what other cards come up, this is going to be a romantic relationship in the long term, it's hard to say at this point, because I think both of you are going to be going through so much transformation and so much healing. It's a mutual energy operating between you, that what that becomes at the end is hard to say until you've been through that. But to help maybe get a sense of that, let's have a look at the energies around you at the moment with your connection to this person and what you're experiencing at the moment around them. So firstly, I'm seeing this is triggering the wounding that you've had in the past. You have had disappointments with relationships in the past. You've had situations where things show promise and then fail to really deliver what you hoped that they would deliver. And so there's something in this connection. Maybe this person reminds you of someone from the past. But there's something that's really kind of triggering those unhealed wounds that you're still carrying. But having said that, there is nothing that can stop this connection from your perspective anyway. And I think because they very much want to connect with you and they very much see you as someone who's a positive in their life after a lot of negative, you are really struck by this person. You have the Tower. When the Tower turns up in relationship readings, it means one of two things normally from my experience. One is it's a relationship that completely explodes existing structures. Now, I don't get the sense for you that that's the case, because it looks to me like you hadn't settled on a committed relationship, or if you had, you've already moved out of one. It disappointed you. It doesn't have a sense of you being in a relationship and the tower coming along and exploding it because suddenly you want to be with someone else. So when that isn't the case, when it isn't really rocking the foundations of your established emotional world, the tower, from my experience, tends to be when you meet that thunderbolt type of relationship where you meet someone that they just strike you so strongly that the attraction is almost irresistible. But what always seems to happen with these, I've seen this so many times, is that the sheer intensity of the connection is also something that brings up fear and brings up lack of confidence in it. And we've got the Seven of Wands reversed. So I think that you at the moment, you're carrying your own pain from something before, but you've come across this person and it just feels electric. It feels like it could completely revolutionize everything that you've come across. And indeed it could potentially, because as I say, they see what they need in you. You're like two mirrors looking at each other. It's a really strong connection. But for you feel like you don't know whether you can do what is necessary to bring it about. I feel like you are going to need to wait for this person to ask you on the journey if they haven't already done it. And if they have, you're almost going to need to take their lead, and that's the kind of Hecate showing the light and the crossroads and the decisions and the choices. Because I think that you feel very, very worried about making the first move or making the decisions. It just seems to go together. And I often say that the relationships that start as friendships are often the easiest, because we don't put all these rules around when we can talk to the person and what they're going to be thinking. You will be wondering all the time about what they're thinking. It's probably why you've come to this reading. They're probably doing the same about you, to be frank, because they really see you as someone they want to connect with. But whether you know all of this, so if they seem to be taking their time, you might think, well, this feels so electric. Why hasn't this landed yet? I think part of it is they have to be fully confident in this and then be able to be with you. And I think they will be the one who needs to take the lead. So it's got a lot of promise. Tower relationships are extraordinary. And they're often, I think, the thing that people talk about when they talk about soulmates or twin flames. It's that real sense of deep recognition. And you are operating, as I say, on an almost mirroring level. You bring to each other what you need. But the sheer enormity of it is the thing that also makes it frightening. So, but I do think the good news is I think that they are in a more calm space about it. They've kind of worked through some of what they have experienced, and they're looking to you as someone who is a healing and positive force, whereas to you they're a transformative force. And I guess that's the point. You're a healing force for them, so they're more likely to feel drawn to you and take the first move. Whereas when you're experiencing someone as a transformative force, which is the Hecate energy here, that can be much more scary. So I think that's why you'll wait. But I do think that if they haven't already done it, they are going to come towards you and offer whatever sort of relationship this is. But I do think with the tower there, it very much underlines that I think that this is more romance, more soul twin type of thing. So I want to use a oracle that is really, really more a fortune-telling oracle. I see tarot and oracles like this as being more illustrative of emotional, psychological and spiritual states of being, whereas occasionally you come across an oracle that is more the traditional, old-fashioned, what are the forces of fate operating on something. And so this particular oracle I'm using, and I'm shuffling at the moment, is that type of oracle. So I just want to see what energy is around there to see if there's any challenges you need to be aware of or any blessings that can help alleviate some of this anxiety that this really intense connection is bringing up for you. So I think this is very positive. And I'm not surprised, because I do feel this kind of mirroring means at least for the short to medium term, there is so much that the two of you can give each other that I think it's almost inevitable that you'll come together in some way. But what this is saying is time is of the essence. So I think when this person, if they haven't already approached you, when they do, you need to drop some of the fear and just see how it goes. Because I see the two of you being in this boat together, traveling to the next destination, and it's a good journey. You've got to get as much as you can out of that kind of fear dynamic that comes from the intensity of it. And I think this is why this is saying utilize logic, reason, and common sense. So don't get into the sort of emotional turbulence around it. Be as grounded as you possibly can. And think about, because you're a natural healer, you are probably someone who, with your enormous empathy, as I said at the beginning, you would normally be the person that friends would come to sort out their relationship problems. So try to almost turn your own wisdom in that sense on yourself and apply it to yourself. It's very hard to do when you're in tower energy, but I think that you can do it because you have that natural healing thing. So if you could almost imagine someone else being in the situation that you were in and what counsel you would give them, it would be very grounded. And then this says a long journey brings reward. So there's a sense of a journey again. Maybe for some of you, you literally will travel somewhere together, or part of the crossroads that this person is at is maybe moving somewhere, and they ask you to go with them, and you could go with them. A long journey brings rewards if that's the case. And that could be some of the tower energy. So for some of you, it could be not so much that it's breaking up an existing relationship, but it might be that they make an offer to you that means that you have to change quite a bit of the structure of your life. And there might be a little bit of reticence there. So for some, that could be literally what we're talking about. But I think for most of you, it's more around going together on that journey and trusting that, and trying not to ground yourself when you're feeling that intensity. So I want to have a look at the astrological energy around this. So we'll have a look at some astrological cards for the other person and for you to see what other information we can get about this. So we've got the transformative energy coming up again here. We have the 8th house endings and beginnings for the other person. So that is Hecate energy if I've ever seen it. The 8th house would be very much the domain of Hecate, really, because it is all about the transformative energy, the changes, and it's often very much about transformative energy coming through intimate relationships and so forth. So there's definitely something going on there for them. And the good news is that they are pretty comfortable with that. The one thing you will need to watch with this at the moment is we've got Mercury retrograde and we've got the 3rd house messages. So the 3rd house is all about communication. So in general terms, their communication is very good and you would communicate very well. But when it comes up with Mercury retrograde, there's a couple of things happening here. One is that this card talks about reinvention, which picks up the change. So some of what could be dismaying you or making you come to a reading like this is that maybe they almost seem like a different person from day to day. There's a lot of change going on in who they are. There's an alchemical process going on in them, really. And that may seem a little bit confusing. The other thing is that Mercury retrograde, it's actually literally retrograde at the moment when I'm filming this, but this is a timeless reading. So it doesn't have to be when you actually see this, when you're drawn to it. But it literally was like that when I was doing the reading. And Mercury retrograde is often about communication getting confused or being misunderstood. So I think there is a sense here that there's so much going on around them in general that you may misunderstand things. So always ask, always clarify, don't assume. And remember, because you've got the Tower energy, you will probably be analysing everything they say a lot. So don't overanalyze it. And if something's not clear, ask for clarity. For you, you are very much connected on a spiritual level, because Sagittarius is very much about spiritual things, and there is I see, and I think that's linking to the empathy. You really can see into them if you use that earthy, grounded common sense and your empathy. rather than sitting in your head and trying to analyze everything they say, then you're really going to understand what's going on. This is part of your life path. For whatever purpose this relationship has and whatever length it has something to do with your life path and your development. So there's something fated about it, and it's about change. So you will change as well. And that was very much the sense I had right at the beginning of this. Because of the nature of the archetypes we're talking about, you are both going to have a profoundly transformative effect on each other. You are going to do a lot to heal this person. They are going to do a lot to help you change and transform and move into what your true life path is. So I want to end up with a couple of other oracles. One is called the Unspoken Oracle, and it tends to show what the other party might say if they feel brave enough, or if you had them on a lie detector test, something, even things maybe that they're not fully aware of, that if they could bring up their sort of unconscious, this would be the sort of thing that they would say. It also sometimes has timing, so we'll see what else Spirit wants to tell you in relation to this from these cards. So this is giving us some interesting information. Firstly, it says within a few months. So I think if you are feeling a bit stuck and you're not sure where it's going, then I think this person will clarify that within a few months. They will have gone through a lot of their decision making within a few months, so you'll have a better feeling about it all. But I think they look up to you. They feel that you bring more to this potentially than they do. I think that part of their transformation, giving you deserve betters coming up here, is that there are things that they really need to change because they're not happy with themselves. It may be that sense with the tarot cards at the beginning where there was an injustice. They may feel that they acted unjustly on occasion, or that some of the injustice and the issues and the difficulties in a former relationship or whatever that was, they feel they carry a lot of guilt for it. So one of the things that you may be healing them on over this period of time is their own self-esteem, because they're a little bit stuck there at the moment. They certainly think that there's many unsaid emotions between you, so they certainly feel the intensity as well, and I would have been surprised that they didn't with those two cards coming up, but that is a little bit of extra information for you to know. I think that they are a little bit hard on themselves. They feel a bit guilty about something in the past. I think that you will take them past that. I don't think this is a message that they literally are somebody who is not of worth to you, because I think there's a lot that you can each bring to each other. But if there's any of you that come to this reading and there is ultimately within a few months you have that sense that they really are not what you need in the longer term, then certainly you can use that potential thing as being something more literal for what you want, and it was there for a period of time. But I think for most it's just there's a lingering sense of guilt about something. So the last thing I'm going to do is I've got these various letters here. I'm just going to pull out a few randomly, and this could be initials of the other person, it could be other people who are around it, it could be any number of things. So it's really just, I'll say what I think it might be starting to say, but equally you may well go, aha, I know what that is or who that is or whatever it is. So let's see what letters come out for you. Oops. So we've got V, L, U, E, X, and A. So as I say, these could be initials. These could be, it's probably not months there because there's not, although that could be April potentially, April at some point. So I think that's probably, well, it depends on when you hear this. At this point in time, if you're hearing it soon after it's been recorded, then that's probably not, because that's too far away. Although August, it could be August, so that could be, it could be August. But if you're hearing this at another time, April or August, if either of those times are within a few months, it might be further information about when you are likely to be able to really determine what's going on. When X comes up, I feel like it could certainly be somebody's name like Xavier, but I also think it's sometimes saying wait, stop. It's like a stop sign, not a stop sign about not having the relationship or anything like that. It's more wait till some further information comes along. And I think in this case, because you've got the Tower, it's saying wait till they come towards you so that you don't feel so discombobulated by it all. You, I think, sometimes is phonetic, and it is basically really a confirmation that they are focused on you, but it could also be something that begins with you as well. So really these other things are more for you to determine whether those letters have some resonance for you, whether they mean something to you. If not, it may not have been part of the message for you in this reading, but if so, it might help with confirmation. So pile 2, this is a fascinating, as I said right at the beginning, dynamic. I can absolutely see why it's intense. I don't know what the longer term outcome is. I certainly think there is an opportunity for a journey together of transformation and healing. And I guess if it's going to be more, then that will be part of that journey in itself. And if not, it is still a very valuable connection and a very positive connection in any case. You are going to feel you're not going to feel the most, that's not the right thing to say, because this other person is feeling as well, but you are going to be feeling for a while within yourself that you're feeling the most because of that Tower energy. That's why you need them to come to you, but I believe that they will. So just give it the time and wait until that occurs, and it's probably going to be within a few months. So pile 2, I hope that that resonates to the feeling that you have in this intense connection, and I hope it gives you some information and guidance on how to navigate this and get the best out of it. I do think it's a positive connection, whatever happens with it. So take from it what you can, and you will naturally give to it as well, because that's who you are. If this has resonated, please like the video, and if you haven't already done so, subscribe so that I can see you in future Pick a Card readings. Welcome pile 3 to your reading. These first 2 cards are from the Mythic Oracle, and they are to represent the other person in this reading and you. And I'm using this oracle because it uses Greek and Roman mythology to show archetypes that are very relevant to how we relate to each other, to our emotions, to who we are in life, and some of the undercurrents that can be occurring even below our own conscious understanding. And what I'm looking at here is both what it means for each of you, because this is how those archetypes are impacting the connection that you have, and also how they interrelate. One of the first things that strikes me about these is that both of these energies in these cards, the way that they're being represented in these cards, are very independent and very individual. That doesn't mean to say you can't have a relationship, but it means that both of you at the moment, in different ways, are focusing on yourself. Your significant other, the other person here, is focusing on what is honourable, what are their ethics, what and how do they want to be in the world. And I suspect it's beyond just relationship. It's probably in their workplace, it's probably with their family members, it's probably in all aspects. They carry with them as Hera, who was the Queen of Heaven with Zeus, a true sense of duty. But Hera in the mythology did a lot for her husband and often sacrificed herself. So part of what this card is asking the person to do is not to sacrifice themselves for a relationship, but to be authentic in the relationship to their own honour code. So there is that sense of individuality around it. Sorry, pile 3, I just quickly did a quick change with the magic of video to put the right crystal there, because I had the crystal from the last reading there still. So we've got the rose quartz now for you, as it should be. So getting back to it, Hera is that sense of authenticity and that sense of honour and ethics. And so there is something in this relationship that is making the other person think about that, how they want to be in a relationship, both connecting with someone and also having their own individuality. And it's the same sort of energy but slightly differently focused for you, because you're coming up as Selene, which is a very moon-based energy. She is connected to the moon. She is connected to emotion. And it's about intuition, and it's about going within and working out what is true to you and authentic to you in terms of emotion. So it's almost like the other person, it's in their head in a way. It's ethics, it's structure, it's logic, those sorts of things. And for you, it's about emotion. Now, at its best, acting at its best, that is a really strong connection that is about the two sides of a coin, basically. So one side of the coin is the emotional connection, and the other side is the structure and the honor and the ethics and the duty, any of those sort of things around a relationship. So acting at its best, it connects really beautifully, and you each bring something to it, and you each respect in each other the need for individuality and your own space. Acting at a more challenging level, it could be two people who are very drawn to each other, because ultimately there is that sense that you're the two sides of a coin, but you are both carrying something maybe from past relationships or past experiences more generally that make you feel like you really have to be more on your own. So I think for many of my pile 3, there is a sense that you are both coming to this, having gone through things in relationships or in life in general or in your family, where you almost made a promise to yourself to be more individual. And now this intense connection has come along, and it's a little bit maybe dismaying. So I think for many, if you are together, you're still trying to work out the boundaries of being together. And if you aren't, it might be that you're circling each other a bit and you haven't quite committed to even testing out the relationship. So I'm going to use the tarot now, and I'm going to look at firstly how the other person is feeling and responding to this, and anything else that Spirit thinks is useful to know to understand where they are in their life at the moment. And then we'll use the tarot to look at where you are, what you're experiencing around it as well. So firstly, let's have a look at the other person. So pile 3, they definitely see in you someone that is an extremely good prospect for a new relationship, for somebody who they feel a very intense psychic connection with. So for all that they're living in their head, they recognize this. They see you like as the high priestess. They see you as being very spiritually connected and someone that they could connect to very spiritually. And they also think that you have some hidden knowledge. I think that they feel on some level there's something they can learn from you, a dimension to life that they can learn from you that they possibly haven't thought about before. They have been disappointed in love more recently. I suspect both of you have. Whether that's literally very recently or whether it's a little while ago, it could be either. But they have been disappointed before, but they really think that there is such a connection in terms of both attraction and also in terms of vision between the two of you. They see that. They see the two sides of a coin. If you think about it, that's literally, in a sense, what's there. The two sides, the two faces, and not in being two-faced, but the two sides of the coin, and you have the coin there. They know this. They see it. Whether they've made the approach or whether you're together and they know it, in either case, they are very well aware that there is great promise here. But it also feels new. This is why I feel for most of my pile 3, you probably aren't in a committed relationship yet. If you are, then they definitely can see going to the next step and the next step, that this is just the beginning of the journey between you. But I do think for most of my pile 3, this is something that's very new. And as I say, I get that sense of you circling each other and this understanding. But they feel a spiritual connection to you. They think that this is very different to past romantic issues, and they see it as a partnership. I think in a past romantic relationship, this person was rather dominated by the person they were with. That's why I think Hera is coming up, because that's part of the Hera Zeus mythology. And possibly Zeus was not exactly the most faithful person in the Greek pantheon, so they might also have been cheated on. There could have been that as well, but they certainly felt disappointed about being themselves within a relationship before, but they see this as being so much more. They're very connected to it. And whether or not, though, they are the person who would make the first move, I'm not sure. There's not necessarily a sense of action there. There's just a sense of recognition. It doesn't mean they won't, but it may be up to you. Let's have a look at what the energy is around you. So they see you as spiritually, as I say, spiritually adept, and they're right, you are. You are someone who has, whether you're conscious of it or not, I don't know, though I think many of my pile 3 will be very conscious of it. You'll be very conscious of why Selene has come up. You'll have a very strong connection to the moon, to the divine feminine, whether you're a male or female, you'll have that connection. You'll be psychic, all of those sorts of things, because you're coming up as the Hierophant. And it just feels like they may be starting to look into that world and you are more established in the world. So there's definitely a connection like that. You are a little bit struck by this relationship with the Chariot reversed. You're not feeling entirely in control of how you feel about it. Maybe because it, in and of itself, is making you question some of the beliefs that you had and some of the structure that you've put around your spiritual practice. Maybe they have a very different spiritual practice, or maybe even what you know of their story makes you wonder about some of that, because there's a little bit of a tension going on there. But you're highly empathic with the King of Cups. You really do have a feeling for what they've gone through. And you've gone through some as well too. This is saying that the empathy that you have, your psychic ability was natural to you, pile 3, but the empathy level that you have has been won through going through difficult experiences. And so that really confirms the sense I had at the beginning, that both of you have decided within yourselves to stand individual even within a relationship, but it doesn't stop the relationship. I think that the challenge may be who makes the first move if it hasn't happened yet. And if you are in a relationship, who takes it to the next level. I feel like what this is saying is that if you aren't together yet, you are probably the person who will make the first move when you've sorted this bit out. Like, what's different about what they have within their kind of spiritual practice or their belief structure to you, and how you can reconcile that. You're likely to make the first move. But if you're together and you're sorting that out, they're likely to be the one that says, let's take this further to another level. So it really depends on who's coming to this reading and where you're up to with this person. But there's a huge amount of potential with this relationship. And I think that was why I suddenly had the visual to change and make sure that I had the right crystal with this, because there is a real sense of love here. And I think it's important to know that, because sometimes when you have two people who have created very healthy boundaries within themselves in being in a relationship, it can feel like it's almost a relationship that's separate rather than together. But I don't think that's where this is ultimately going. So I want to have a look at what a fortune deck would tell you. So when we look at tarot and we look at these sort of oracles, they generally resonate because they outline emotional, psychological and spiritual states of being that people can relate to, and they can see what the logical process is after that and where their choices are and what they need to think about or feel into to do that. But every once in a while you have an oracle that is much more like your classic gypsy fortune-telling oracle. And so that's what I'm shuffling at the moment, an oracle that's like that. I just want to see if there's any other information around this that is more around fortune-telling as opposed to the psychological states. Anything else that would be useful for you to know. Now, fortune-telling decks do not mean that something is written in stone. It doesn't mean that you absolutely are caught with whatever comes out of this. It's just other information to take into account around it. So this very much fits with what I feel, which is that this is very positive. Firstly, we've got you are destined to succeed. So I think you will find the way, the two sides of the coin will find the way to both honour both of your boundaries and your individuality and be together. So I think that that is very positive. We've got the hourglass, which says time is of the essence. The interesting thing is, pile 3, that I've done 3 readings in this video and every single one has had the hourglass. So I think part of what's drawing people to these readings, the intensity in and of itself, is creating a dynamic. And in this case, the dynamic is being created by your psychic connection. It's saying follow your intuition, and it naturally fell with the High Priestess and the Hierophant. There is an extraordinarily strong spiritual connection between the two of you. And I think both of you know it, and both of you will find it, and you know that it is important. Somebody's got to make the first move, or if you are together, somebody's got to take it to the next level, whichever we're talking about there. You're both aware of it. And I do think whoever it is will do it at the time that is right. But I also think that both of you have some things to sort out before you trigger the hourglass. But I don't think it's a long-term period of time. I think that you will be at the next stage of this relationship sooner rather than later. So let's use an astrology oracle to see if we can get any more information and whether that can give more confirmation on that sense that I have about this, that it's sort of naturally falling into place. So firstly, some astrological energy for your other person. And then for you. So this is interesting, pile 3. For your other person, they are definitely going through some changes in their life. They're definitely, whatever that past relationship was, past situation, they're processing the last bit of that, because they know that moving past that and becoming more in alignment with their ethics and their beliefs is part of their life's purpose. So they're heading in the right direction. When you get the North Node coming up, spiritually they're heading in the right direction, and that's probably why there's such a strong spiritual connection showing up for this. Both that you naturally have that, but that also they are on the right pathway, because if they weren't, then maybe that spiritual connection would not align as easily as I think it is. I think for most of my pile 3, they'll probably be the person who makes the next step. So interestingly enough, that might suggest that many of you are with the person already, because that's the feeling I had about it. If not, if you are the person who needs to make the first step, then I think the answer is yes. So either way, there's a very strong sense of self-actualization going with this, and that they see you as part of that. For you, you see that this is the opening of a real sense of abundance and growth. You can see the potential in this. And that potential for you, for some reason, has been missing up until this coming along. I think that you've found other relationships not fulfilling, and possibly you were the support always in those relationships. They were exhausting to you because the person wasn't at your level. But this is not the case here. This is your work on yourself, your reinvention has been part of what has triggered the connection and has brought this sort of energy to you. Now, there is one little warning when I see Mercury retrograde. Firstly, when I am filming this, Mercury is retrograde. This is a timeless reading, so of course it may not be when you actually come to this reading, if it's sometime later. But at any stage when Mercury goes retrograde, there is a possibility of misunderstandings. So I think it's very important to make sure all communication is very clear between you, particularly if a lot of that communication is operating on the unconscious and the psychic level. It's important in how you communicate on a day-to-day level that there's a lot of clarity. And this person does live a little bit more in their head, and you live a bit more in your soul. So that's going to be important. You are going to be picking up so much of the nuances of this. You probably won't be misunderstanding anything. You'll have a very clear sense, but they do operate a little bit more. Remember, they're not quite as advanced as you, pile 3. They operate a little bit more in their head. So just be very careful about what you say and how you say it. And speaking of what people say, I want to use an oracle that's called the Unspoken Oracle. And it's for what your other person would say if either they were brave enough, or this had come out of their unconscious, or you had them on a lie detector test. Not that I think you'd need that with this person, but it's really just the kind of underlying messages that are coming from their heart. And it sometimes also has timing. So we'll see what Spirit wants to tell you in relation to this part of it. So there may be a part where they can feel the intense connection back with you, but they may feel that you're a little bit missing in action in some sense. That as I say, I think you have more of a sense of this connection, even though it's there, than they do. I mean, they have the sense. They're very much directed towards you. pile 3, but maybe they're not feeling, and that's why the communication is there, because they're saying open your heart space, and I think you already have. But because they live in their head and what they're trying to do around boundaries is around beliefs, and what you're trying to do is boundaries around emotions, it's possible that it's coming across that you're a bit closed off. So you may still need to do that for a while, pile 3, that's fine. But be aware that they may be feeling that, and they may think this is too long, or maybe they think that they're delaying things more than they should around that as well. But this is nice. I always compare others to you. So I think they can see, Hera here does not think you're a Zeus. You know, Hera here thinks that you're someone who is more the other side of the coin, as I said. It's the right connection. I really feel this for pile 3. It's a very positive connection. So what I'm going to end up with is just some letters, general letters. And the purpose of this is that sometimes it might have initials that are relevant, either of the person or of other people around this that might be important in how this develops, or it might have other indications for you that are useful. And some of them I may be able to land on when I put this out, and some of them you may be able to work out for yourself. But it's just a thing to close off the reading, just for any other further information that might apply for some of the people who are coming to this reading. So we have the letter H, M. M is very important for some reason. N, X, T, K, and I. So sometimes letters that could be potentially months can give timing. So that could be potentially May, depending upon when you're listening to this. And it could be, at the moment, I am recording this literally just as we've moved into June. So we're just past May. So it could be that this is quite early and you met in May if you're listening to this near the time it was recorded. But if you're not at another time, May may be potentially important. It could also indicate a month, literally. It could be the initial for a name, Michael, Mary. It could be any of those things. And similarly for things like H, K, I, T, and N, they're most likely to be initials, either of people concerned, the other person, or maybe even workplaces or something like that that can indicate how you've met, and that can make you go, okay, yes, this anchors the reading for me. When I see X, I always say that it could be a name like Xavier or something like that, but I also think it just means there's a bit more information. Wait till the information comes through. So I think that this is all around timing, but I feel like there is a little bit more work that the other person has to do to reach your level. Pile 3, I don't think it's going to take a long time, but I think you'll get that sense of it, and you'll get the sense of how you're communicating and how to make that communication clearer, and then you'll be able to make a decision about whether you make the move or whether you're responding to them making the move. But I think it's just saying that although you've got the timers of the essence card, I think it's saying time is of the essence in two ways, and it's partly about when the decision point comes, you'll need to make the decision fairly quickly, but don't make the decision premature of the actual question, if that makes sense. But I do think this is very positive. I would be very surprised if most of the people who come to pile 3 won't find a very key, major and very suitable, very connected relationship coming out of this intense connection, and that you really are recognising the other side to the coin for you and a really good balance. So I hope that resonated, and I hope that it gives you some information to deal with this situation. It really isn't telling me overall who's going to make the move or who's going to take it to the next level, but I think whatever happens, it'll be at the right time and when both of you are ready. And I think there's an enormous amount of growth and opportunity in this for you, and it's very spiritually connected. So I very much wish you well with this. I'd love to hear in the comments if this resonates and how, because it's a really interesting dynamic. So if you have time, please let me know. Otherwise, if you've liked the reading, please like it literally with the thumbs up, and if you haven't already done so, subscribe, and then I can see you in future pick a card readings.